Hello everyone and welcome to my second tutorial for Spark AR, and today we're gonna learn how to weight objects after we rig them to have better control on the physics and the overall movement of the object. Afterwards, we're going to create the material in Substance Painter to give the object a more interesting and realistic look. So let's begin. I got this model, which I got from CG Trader. You have a lot of cool models in CG Trader. I got this one, a low poly hair model. It's important to use a low poly model because it's compatible with VR and AR and it doesn't consume too much memory and it doesn't weigh too much. And for our needs today, that's gonna be perfect. There are a lot of cool artists who create very cool models, which you can use if you don't want to create your own. Get your model from CG Trader. So here I have the final result of what we're going to do today. If you go in viewport display and click in front, we can see our rig, which I already created. And we want to get to a situation where we can move the object as nice and as correct as possible. By doing so, I've been using weight painting. If you watched my previous tutorial and you're okay with rigging, so you know that when we rig, so we always choose with automatic weights. Now, the automatic weights most of the time are enough, but sometimes you want to have a better control of your model and which bone controls what. So if we go to our model and choose the mesh and go to weight paint and we choose the object data properties, under vertex groups we can see what each bone is doing, where each bone is affecting. By toggling the X-ray, you can see all sides of the model, and by that you can paint all together on the same sides, which is easier than go around and do the paint. So before we start, just hit N to open up the brush settings. Under options, we want to make sure that every time we draw or add, we have auto normalized selected. I came to find out that when subtracting, removing the auto normalize works better, and when adding or painting, using the auto normalized gives better results. Another important thing is under weights, the clean option, which can help us clean each selected bone, and the smooth option, which helps us to smooth our selection when painting a selected vertex group. These tools are super powerful, super helpful and important, and it's good to know that they exist because sometimes they can make life really easy. Once we got all these things covered, we can start from the beginning. So here I have the base model and I'm gonna sculpt it the way I want it to look, just giving it some modifications and changes. I'm not gonna cover the sculpting on this tutorial, so I'm just gonna fast forward to the finish of the rigging process. Once I'm done with the sculpting of the model, I'm moving to the next part, which is rigging. If you haven't seen my rigging tutorial, you can go ahead and watch it and learn more about how to rig a model in Blender. And here I'm just gonna quickly cover the process so we can get to the weight painting. So this is the part where we parent our model to the rig with automatic weights. As you can see, in most cases we have good workable results, but if we want more control on the effect of the bones on our model, this is where weight painting comes in. After rigging with automatic weights, we've basically created vertex groups for each bone. If we go to edit mode, so then for each bone, we can see the areas where it's affecting. Now, if we choose all of the options, holding Shift and selecting the edge and the faces, we can then deselect the areas we don't want by holding Control and left click. As you can see here, I'm selecting on this side, but the other side is not affected. So I'm gonna change the view to X-ray mode, and then it gives me transparency to the model. And then all the actions that I make are being affected throughout the entire model on this area. A useful thing in this stage is to know the names of the bones on which we are working around. So by going back to object mode and selecting the armature, I can choose to display the names. That way I can know where I'm at and what I'm doing around this bone. So that way we can know on which bone we're working by deselect and select again. So for example, if I'm choosing bone number 6, I can select it and see the areas which it's affecting. Now, another thing we can see is by going to white paint, we can also see this information with the colors. So if we go to pose mode, we can see that if we move this bone, so all the other areas it's affecting would move with it. In white painting, we would sometimes want to give the affected area more accuracy, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. So starting with the first bone, as you can see, bone in the root, and the bone is affecting areas of the top of the hair, which I don't want it to be affected by it. If I go again into pose mode and I move this around, so you can see we get this kind of glitches that we don't want to have. So fixing that would be to choose the exact area that we want to affect with this bone. So I'm going to choose subtract brush. I'm going to deselect auto normalize and just erase all the areas. Another way you can do it is go to weights, clean, and really clean automatically all the areas from that bone that comes out from that bone. Once it's all clean, as in blue, I can go ahead and choose the add brush. As you can see here, the weight is set on 1, which is the maximum. So if I'm painting, the center would be red, which is the most affected. If we lower the value, we can see it would take a few more clicks to get to the red color, and by that be more affected. Now our goal is to have the fullest effect in the center of the bone, or in the center of where we want the effect of the bone to be. So I'm gonna use weight 1 with maximum strength, and then when I want to paint, I'm turning back on auto normalize, painting, a few strokes, go to weight, smooth, and then I can have a better selection automatically with the smooth tool. Once you're happy with that bone, we can move to the next one. And I'm gonna do the same process here. I'm gonna deselect auto normalize and subtract or clean. You can see it's not always working, but here we can do it manually, it's okay. So we can see that the first bone is here. I'm choosing add again, auto normalize, and painting. I want to have the red affecting the center, and then I go to smooth, moving to the second bone. I'm doing the same process. Normally you don't always have to remove everything, but I'm just showing it as an example to how you can have a clean start. So now we can go and test what we just did. As you can see, there is a glitch here. I can fix that by going to weights and normalize all. There's another small point here. Bone number 3. There it is. As you can see, the tip is unaffected, therefore it stays in place. So I'm just gonna give it a bit more color to affect it for sure. As you can see, it's a very delicate process, but once you get it right, so you can get the movement you want more realistic or accurate, and you can have more control of what to move and how. I'm gonna do the same to the other side now. In this model there are a lot of like strings and layers, even though we can't see it here, but the paint sometimes cannot get inside. As you can see, I disabled the strength pressure. Can also increase the radius. And now we're good. So basically this is the part where we finished the weight painting. We're ready to export the object. As some of you may know, there is a new plugin for Blender by SparkAR. So before I'm exporting the model, I'm just gonna make sure that it's compatible with SparkAR. As we can see here, we got a check on the triangles count and we got a check on the scale and positioning. So once your object is validated to be compatible with SparkAR, we can extract it. We're not gonna do it with the toolkit, however, because the toolkit can only export one mesh and we need to export the armature and the object. So we're gonna select them both, go to File, Export as an FBX, make sure you limit to selected objects and export. In the next step, I'm going to show you how we can create a texture using Substance Painter before we are moving to SparkAR. So I'm just dragging our file onto the program. We want to use a small resolution, 1024, so things not get too heavy in Spark AR. And here you can see our model. A very important note about UV unwrapping and textures. In this tutorial, we didn't unwrap the model in the beginning. The best thing will always be to unwrap the model before we even start working on it. Normally, in some models, the UV map are correct, but for our work with Substance Painter, it's best to do the unwrap ourselves. I'm gonna show you quickly how we do it in Blender. We go to UV Editing tab, we select our model. Under Edit mode, we click A to choose all the faces, edges and vertices. As you can see here, this is the current UV map of this object. We want to do a more corrected one by selecting the object, by pressing A, all in edit mode, then pressing U and choose Smart UV Project. Press OK, and here you can see that the UV map is displayed correctly with all the parts of our object, the inner ones, the external ones, and that's a better way to work with our object when we want to create new textures for it and work with it so it can look good. This is a very important step that we should do every time when we have a new object that we want to create new textures for. To begin, we want to make sure the model is using an alpha shader, a PBR metal rough with alpha test. I'm going to duplicate this layer and add a fill on it. Choosing the base color of our model. I'm going to go for black. So I'm going to duplicate the base color layer. And I'm going to use a black mask on this layer. And we're going to use this layer for the hair texture. We can add a fill. And from procedural shelf, we can go and look for a fur, which kind of looks like hair. You have a few types that you can choose from. We're gonna go with that one. As you can see, it's already starting to apply the texture. You can change the color and see the hair texture applied already on our model. Next thing we want to do is to adjust the way that the hair texture is being wrapped around our model. As you can see, we can change the scale, the rotation, the offset. I'm gonna zero out all of that. For the scale, we can unlock the proportions because we wanna have the ability to really create this kind of effect where the hairs go from up to down. We can use the offset to choose based on the mesh, like where some parts meet. For example, here we can now we need to change it to the point where we don't see these stitches. Once you're satisfied with the UV scaling and offset and rotation, you can go ahead and move to the next step. We can control the way the environment affects the texture with exposure, rotation. We can decide where the light comes from, and by that the shading on the texture. Next, we can duplicate this layer again. We can choose a brighter color. It's gonna use as the highlights. We can add levels and adjust this color even more. Can go by luminance to just control this range of colors. So as you can see, it's not pitch black. It has some grays and almost like brighter colors to really give the definition of the hairs. Basically, these are all the layers that we're gonna use for this mesh. We can go between them and adjust it the way we want it to look, just to define it a little bit more. You see the normal map can control how high it goes. It's gonna give the mesh the shape of hairs. And once you're satisfied with the texture, you can go and export it. We're gonna want to use here again metal and roughness. For the size, we're gonna go on 1024, so again it could be easier on Spark, and we can go ahead and export the textures. And now we're gonna move to Spark AR and set up everything together. So we got the object loaded in Spark AR with the materials. We have the texture, the normal map, and the roughness to control the specular. This is how I set it, but you can set it however you want. You can also choose a physically based shader and make it look even more glossy. I'm using a head decoration template. As you can see, it comes with the occluders. I added Nolan's bust occluder here just to hide the tails when they move. And the model goes under the head movement null object. I covered this part in my previous tutorial, so I'm not gonna go deep on that in here. I'm just gonna quickly repeat the steps to apply the physics for the hair. But for deeper understanding, you can look at my previous tutorial for how to apply physics on a 3D object. So once you're happy with the physics, let's go ahead and adjust the model on the head. This project will be available in my Patreon. You'll be able to download it and have full access to learn and look at the project at your own time. Thanks for watching. If you find this tutorial helpful, don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and follow me on Instagram for more tutorials and filters.